You have to understand, this case was very carefully constructed because I've previously challenged the objectives of government, said they can't prohibit drug use. In this case, I say you can do whatever you want, but you've got to have a rational means to achieve your objective. Pick your objective and then approach it in a rational way, because the way you've approached your objectives now is causing harm to people and not contributing to the good of society. So if all we're challenging are the means to achieve an objective, that means government has carte blanche to do whatever they want if they want to think about it. So it's just very strange to say Justice Himmel has overextended herself as a judge into the realm of public policy. Plus, I want to tell you something as a constitutional lawyer, if I can call myself that for a moment. When we created the Charter in 1982, I was actually there by coincidence. I was in Ottawa. And I actually saw Trudeau and the Queen sign this thing. And I swear to God, I saw Trudeau wink at the Queen. Okay? No, I really did see it. Now, he was very debonair, and I don't know what was going on at 24 Sussex later on. And the thought actually is not a good thought, but putting that aside, I've always felt that the wink I saw was that the politicians realized that there was much ado about nothing. Because even though the Charter has changed Canada, we still have something called parliamentary supremacy. We did a very Canadian thing. We created rights, and we created a clause that says the government of Canada can override these rights as long as they say they're going to. It's called the notwithstanding clause. And I bring this up because you should never criticize a judge for being an activist judge. That's how you create the dialogue. We created a system where Parliament always has the last word. And right now, Stephen Harper is not telling you the truth when he's suggesting the court took upon themselves a mandate they don't have. That is the court's mandate. Now it's time for you to take your mandate and look at this. But quite frankly, I'm happy he's not. Okay. The second thing I get a lot, because I did a lot of media right at the beginning, because it's very important. You know, part of this case was about exposing the issue publicly and getting the debate going. And I do these discussions and debates with people, and they always try to catch me on the same thing. It was so annoying. At some point, they just turn to me and say, really, Professor Young, would you want your daughter to be a hooker? Right? And it's like, it's live television, first of all, you know, so it always was difficult. So I never answered it properly, because I don't like the question. I say, I don't have a daughter, right? But it's a question I do want to speak to and why it was being asked. This is a question that arises out of very strong ideological framework about the sex work, okay? It's not an empirically sound statement, but a lot of people believe, and you can believe what you want, that commercial sex is inherently degrading, dehumanizing, and violent. So why the hell would you ever want to open it up and have your daughter possibly enter into something that's just going to be dehumanizing to her? And by the way, that's the government's position. The government's position in this case is the law may be imperfect. It may be somewhat irrational. But sex work is so inherently degrading, Parliament's entitled to send a message to discourage people from entering this, even if we're somewhat irrational about it. That's how important it is to deter people from doing this. Okay. I've had to live with this for 3 years now, this sort of idea that sex work is inherently degrading. I understand it academically. I've read a lot of it. It makes sense. It just doesn't speak to a world I live in. Let me give you the examples of what I mean, because I basically lived through the sexual revolution and seen it. We can all go home tonight and just get pay-per-view Rogers and watch hardcore sex. Now you're going, oh, big deal, because you've become habituated to it. You know how big that is? Ozzie and Harriet slept in separate beds, people. Go watch Dick Van Dyke in the 60s. They slept, Mary Tyler Moore and Dick Van Dyke slept in separate beds. So God forbid, popular culture, we even have an image of a man and woman procreating, because that's what they would call it, I guess. So, I don't know, you know, I'm watching videos and watching Lady Gaga. I'm following stories about Charlie Sheen and his goddesses, and I'm thinking, you're telling me commercial sex is inherently degrading? We live in a society that's so highly sexualized, and people make money off of it. Billions of dollars are made sexualizing our society. So why does suddenly we stop short when it comes to selling sex? And by the way, the hardcore pornography you're watching, what's going on there? Someone's being paid for sex. It's just not so private. It's a bit more public. So, here's here's what I say. This is the world we live in. You may not like it. Sometimes I even wonder where it's going, but it is the world we live in. Unless you believe in Vladimir Lenin's idea that politicians can be engineers of your soul, look what happened there. Okay? So I'm not sure it's in the capability of a government of Canada to turn back the clock and bring us back to Ozzie and Harriet. So I think, you know, we got to start being a bit more realistic in our academic positions so they're at least somewhat coherent or cohere with what goes on in society. The bottom line is this. If I have to do one of these shows after the appeal, and somebody says to me, what about your daughter? I'm not going to say I don't have a daughter this time. What I'm going to say is something like this. You're right. I don't think I want her to be a hooker. I also don't want her to be a politician. And quite frankly, I don't want her to be a lawyer either. But more importantly than my preferences, if she so chooses to enter the sex trade as her line of work, I think a good parent would say this, and I got to read it because it doesn't come naturally for me. But if she must work in the sex trade, I would not want the law to put her in harm's way. That's the answer I got to give. So, the bottom line is, Government of Canada is entitled to send a message to discourage people from entering the sex trade. That's their mandate. They can do that. But one tool that's not available to them to accomplish this is to make the activity more dangerous. It is not ethically sound to try to discourage someone by putting their life at risk. So, I fully understand the academic position. I cross-examined some of the leading scholars in this area. I just fundamentally disagree with those who think it's inherently degrading. This is not an empirically based perspective. It is a political, philosophical statement which you are entitled to believe in, but it is actually not the position of the Government of Canada. It could become the position of the Government of Canada as we move towards what's called a Swedish model, which I'm not going to speak to, but I might if I take some questions about that. So the reality is, I may understand what the prohibitionists say and what they're trying to achieve, but I don't respect it, and I'll tell you why I don't respect it. I don't like ideology. Ideology is a thought-terminating process whereby you don't have to answer difficult questions because you just go, you know, oh, let me look what's in Das Kapital, right? Let me look what's in Catherine McKinnon's book. Answer it yourself, and I'll tell you how I proved this to myself. I wanted to see how far the Crown witnesses, by the way, who are all American, no Canadian witnesses, how far they would go with their, it's inherently degrading, you can't make it safer, you can't make it better. So I remember everyone, I had to give them the same hypothetical. Tell me, what do you say to a 55-year-old widower who is married since the age of 20, was chronically shy, never dated, and still has a healthy sex drive, and is too shy to ask women out? Are you saying it is morally degrading and wrong to hire a sex worker? I tried to make it as neutral as possible, almost sound like therapy. And I still got the same answers. It's wrong. He shouldn't do it. And I said, so what's the solution? He shouldn't have sex. And I understand that too. But that's not a very sensitive response to somebody. I mean, sexuality, for all the harm it does in certain occasions, is one of the most vibrant, beautiful things in life. And to tell somebody, just because you're chronically shy, you got to go the rest of your life without physical intimacy? Who are these people? No, seriously, who are these people? So then I got into the whole idea about indoor versus outdoor, because my whole pitch was empirical evidence shows that indoor sex work is safer. Not completely safe, but safer than outdoor work. And they all show up and say it's the exact same. It doesn't matter. The level of risk is the exact same.